Ayo, back at it again with another video. Thank you all for watching. I greatly appreciate it. So, time of recording late in the night on the 8th of October 2024, and this is a Ukraine war update video. In my last video, I talked about the city or settlement of Vuhledar, and as of time of recording at the moment, Vuhledar has been captured by Russian forces. In my last video, the Russians had pushed along this road right here, and we're trying to push, and we're basically encircling Vuhledar in 3 directions. And then they were trying to push for a full encirclement so they can have both forces meet up and ultimately encircle. But Vuhledar has been captured by Russian forces. With that being said, now looking to push towards from Vodiane towards these settlements to the north and northwest. Looks like the Russians are still trying to push along this bulge in the line right here, pushing from Hostre to Ostrivske, trying to force their way down from Ukrainsk towards Kurakivka. So if we look in the past couple days and weeks, you see that so Vuhledar was under Ukrainian control. The Ukrainians had more control over here, and as you progress, the Russians made a push along here. The Russians made a push here and kept pushing. And at this point, it was pretty much when my last video was recorded. Vuhledar was more or less being encircled on 3 sides. You know, tightening the Russians were tightening their grip around Vuhledar, pushing around here. Vuhledar fully captured by early October, and then the Russians have kept pushing here. Okay. So not a whole lot going on around Selidove in the past couple days. The line has been relatively stagnant. There's been some movement, but so the Russians now have Selidove more or less under 3 sides surrounded from the north, northeast, the east, and the south. Pushing from Novhorodivka towards Pokrovsk. There's still, there's not a whole lot of movement. I thought the Russians would try and push their way from Horodivka all the way up to this road junction. They have not. Looks like there's, I don't know if it's a creek, I don't know if it's a small river, some body of water. There hasn't been a whole lot of movement in that area of the front. This more or less along Ocheretine, Horodivka, that has been relatively stagnant the past couple days. Nelipivka, there's been some, looks like the Ukrainians had a counterattack in the area of about 1.5 square kilometers. New York is under Russian control, but Nelipivka looks like it's still contested. Toretsk looks like the Russians are still trying to force their way along this road and push into the center of Toretsk. No new update there. Let's see if there's any movement in the line. Pass. couple weeks. This area of the front from New York up to Chasov Yard, there's been relatively stagnant. Not a whole lot of movement. Some, but not a whole lot. Chasov Yard, not a whole lot there. The Russians control the Canal microdistrict, but it looks like the canal is the battle line there. Not a whole lot going on around elsewhere on the front line. Looks like the Russians are still trying to push from Pishane towards the Oskil River and the Oskil Reservoir, and if they're able to successfully get there in about 2.5 kilometers, then that would put the Ukrainians in this little bulge around Kupiansk and east of the Oskil River, would put that under stress, because then you would be surrounded from the south, from the northeast, and from the east, because then you would have to fall back towards Kupiansk, and then that part of the line would be the Oskil River and the Oskil Reservoir. Looks like the Russians are trying to do that in small parts along the front around here, but they're not as successful as this thrust that the Russians have been doing. From here to about here, it's about 12.5 kilometers. They've been able to push, and if they're able to meet with the river or the reservoir, then Ukrainian forces in this area would be under pressure on 3 sides and would maybe have to get pushed back across the river or the reservoir or whatnot, and push back towards Kupiansk. Not a whole lot around Volchansk. Looks like minor Ukrainian counterattack, 2.5 roughly square kilometers. Not a whole lot there. Not a whole lot in the Kharkiv area. So since the last update, we have Vuhledar under Russian control. You have the Russians making their progress around Ukrainsk, Hostre, Kurakivka. Not a whole lot of movement in the line up here. Some movement around Nelipivka in New York. Some movement around Toretsk. Not a whole lot. Chasov Yar, not a whole lot of movement. Actually, no movement. And the only other movement that I see along the line maybe is... Oh, I forgot to cover this. Nevsky, the Ukrainians are now in a little bit of a bulge. Makivka to the north, Nevsky to the south, and you're circled on 3 sides with a body of water to your rear. Looks like the Russians are trying to do that in 2 areas along the front, pushing to a body of water, trying to push the Ukrainians back there, and ultimately trying to push the Ukrainians out of this territory back behind the Oskil River, back towards Kupiansk. So there's been some movement along the front up here, not a whole lot. From Toretsk up to the Liman area, not a whole lot. But there's been movement along Vuhledar, there's been movement around Ukrainsk. So that's kind of the update as of right now, late in the evening on October the 8th. So Vuhledar fell to Russian forces, and Russian forces have been making minor gains in other areas around Kurakove, minor around Toretsk, and some minor gains in the northern part of the line near the Kupiansk area, near the Makivka Nevsky part of the line. So that's the update as of right now. All right. I'll see you on the next video. Deuces.